Welcome everyone to a new Urban Lands Talk. Today we will be talking about repurposing neighborhoods. We will be discussing about how to make a space for circular economy practices in cities. I have the pleasure to be moderating today. I'm Ana Calvo, a communications officer at the Driving Urban Transitions Partnership. And I would like to, as usual, invite you all to write on the chat where are you joining us from today. So to start with, I would like to introduce Anne Maudsley. She is the coordinator of the transition pathway in the circular urban economies in the Driving Urban Transitions. And she's going to tell us a little bit of the context of the talk today. What is this concept of repurposing neighborhoods? Why are the speakers here? What have they contributed to in the partnership? So maybe I would like to, Anne, would you like to say a few words and introduce the topic of today?
Yes.
What's the context?
Yes, thanks, Anna. And as Anna said, my name is Anne Maudsley, and I'm one of the coordinators for the Circular Urban Economies Thematic Transition Pathway in Driving Urban Transitions. And I am based in Sweden, working at the Swedish Research Council for Sustainable Development, FORMUS, which is one of the DUT partners. And today I'm also joined by my colleague Bjorn Velsten from FORMUS, who is the other coordinator of the Circular Urban Economies Transition Pathway. And as Anna said, today we're joined by three of the contributors to a position paper on regenerative neighbourhoods that has developed out of the Circular Urban Economies Transition Pathway as part of a longer discussion over several years, including workshops and conference sessions and other discussions with key actors and our stakeholder community. And then in autumn last year, we had an open call for contributions, during which has resulted in a nice mix of contributions from representatives from academia, practice, from different communities and different countries, and not least a lot of examples from European cities, some of which we'll hear about today. And our aim in this was to open up rather than close down understandings of regenerative neighbourhoods, and without risking to water down the concept. And we view this term, regenerative neighbourhoods, as boundary, but also in a formative and yet underclosed state. We deliberately defined it loosely as livable, inclusive and green communities and neighbourhoods that are sustained by circular resource flows. Such an interpretation allows for the term to gain actors in the same room and for discussion, which is also what we want to achieve when designing calls on such and similar topics, specific and yet underclosed. And today's Urban Lunch Talk is focused on alternative ways of using spaces in neighbourhoods to facilitate circularity practice. And we are joined by the authors of three chapters, chapters 6, 9, and 10 of the position paper. And I will hand back over to you now, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for introducing yourself, and also Bjorn. Then let's get started, and we will welcome the first of the speakers today. That is Anita Duka. She's an architect. She's also a placemaker and interaction designer. She's based in Sweden. Anita is also specialized in participation and co-designed processes for sustainable and democratic transitions. She's currently involved in a non-profit association that's called Backa Kocken. So Anita, would you like to tell us a little bit more about you and also your work in your contribution to the position paper?
Yes, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for organizing this. So yes, as you said, I am a co-designer. I do participation, mostly in neighborhoods and urban neighborhoods, and I have background both academic and professional in architecture, but also interaction design, which is a subfield of user experience, so technology. And I focus on transition places to sustainability and democracy and facilitate the process to that. Right now I'm involved in both Baka Cooking, which is an initiative and a non-profit organization that wants to turn the former prison of the neighborhood here, Schilsberg, in a cooperative social space for Malmö and for the neighborhood. And also I'm part of the Degrowth Institute. It's also a non-profit that works towards awareness about the concept of degrowth. And a little bit about the project that I contributed with in the paper. So it is about, again, my neighborhood or a sub-area of the neighborhood of Schilsberg called Seggepark. And to give you a little bit of context, Seggepark was a mental health institution area. And then almost 10 years ago, there was a densification plan for the area. And with that, a sustainability strategy around the concept of sharing. My project was to co-create a digital platform to facilitate communication among the different residences that are involved here, which are 12 developers building new buildings, residential buildings, and people moving in here in the area, but also it involves the municipality and other companies, energy companies, etc. So we did a 2-month project with residents and with the coordinator of my residence here. And we co-designed a prototype of this digital platform on one on communication and the other on imagination, on what can be shared, from assets to activities that involve trust. So the key outcome of this is, yes, the prototype of the digital platform, but also that we need in-person communication and facilitation to establish this trust that says, I'll borrow you my sewing machine. So yes, I trust that you'll turn it back to me, but also promote connections, and that turns into access to goods and connections in the neighborhood.
So when you meant about assets, you meant like sewing machines. Are there any other kind of equipment, just to put things into?
Yeah, it can be tools. It can be, can I borrow your bike because mine has broken and I need to go to the city and I'll return it when I come back. And yeah, then different activities like from workshops to working out together to barbecues to anything.
Really interesting. I look forward to hear more about this. Thanks, Anita, for introducing yourself and the contribution that you made. Then I'm going to introduce the next speaker, that is Diego Luna Quintanilla. He's an architect, he's an urban designer, and also a strategic planner at the Sweco. He's based at the moment in Belgium. And he also runs a non-profit that is called CACRI. I'm very curious about hearing about this. Can you please tell us a little bit about you and also about your contribution to this paper, the position paper from the UT?
Sure.
Diego?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you all for your presence today. Yeah, indeed, I'm working for the last 12 years, I think, especially on urban design and strategic planning. So I'm an architect in principle, but I've been really working on many scales of urban development in the last years. I've also been working on regional special policies, but also on the neighborhood scale, and most recently also on the building scale by thinking together with clients about how certain buildings should transition and what's the logic behind, what's the programmation behind, and which actors should be involved. So it's a whole process, and it involves not only public authorities, but also private clients. So it has been very fruitful in the last years. And I also work a lot on transition pathways. So at Sweco, we have a knowledge development platform called Urban Insight, in which we treat every year a different topic that is linked to these planetary challenges and transitions we're living in. So this year is about resilience, and so I invite you all to look at the things we have produced in the last months, very interesting articles and studies as well. And also in parallel, I follow, I coordinate the social inclusion program from the Division Urbanism in Sueco, Belgium. So there I tried to, together with my colleagues, to look at how the projects that we do on many scales, they keep on being inclusive in a way, and they contribute to also the implementation of inclusion within the projects. That sometimes is a challenge, of course. And as you were mentioned, Anna, I also co-founded a small association called Kakri, and actually the purpose of this association is to valorize the street as a cultural space. So we do projects that they're always putting into value the street, but also the culture that is can be hosted or is emerging from the streets. And there is a lot of placemaking also involved, for sure. And then concerning my contribution for the paper, and thank you, and Bjorn, for the great cooperation in the production. It was very nice and very fruitful. So the article I wrote, it is about infrastructures in between. And basically, the main idea is that as we are facing this kind of transition towards a circular society, we also need to equip our neighborhoods to facilitate that. So the whole challenge is, how do we make circular practices not only an industrial process that happens somewhere in an industrial plant, but how it relates also with the daily life of people, how it helps to bridge the things you could do at your home with the things you could do at your neighborhood, and then with the things you could do in another scale. And for that, I realized that there's more and more needed infrastructure within the neighborhood scale that is part of your daily life that could help supporting this circular behavior. And this infrastructure, of course, we have in the neighborhood, the basic infrastructure that every neighborhood should have: schools, libraries, public spaces, community places. But we need also some other type of infrastructure that is a bit more technical, that could help to repurpose things, that could help technically on how to fix a broken item, how to put a broken item within a circular chain. And that includes not only technical equipment and technical space, but it also requires capacity building, it requires synergies between actors, it requires a lot of other processes. And I believe that because it's still experimental, all these facilities, they are technical, but they're also very specific and very new. We need to test and innovate. And then placemaking, it is a good method actually to start implementing these kinds of facilities. So in a nutshell, this is a bit what it is about. I also talk about some case studies.
Yeah, thanks for making that summary. I'm looking forward to hear more about these infrastructures needed to repair and to make this circularity practices happen. Then I would like to introduce the last speaker, Elena Junta. She's a design director at Swift. It's an architecture company, and also an adjunct professor at the Design School Politecnico di Milano in Italy. In recent years, she has specialized herself in projects to regenerate non-urban communities, so areas a bit outside of the cities. So thanks so much for making time for joining us today, Elena. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and also about your contribution to the publication?
Thank you, Anna. Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. As said, my background is in the field of design. I had the opportunity to pursue my PhD under the guidance of Ezio Manzini. That was the person that in Italy opened the topic of social innovation service design. It was around 2007. And in that time in Italy, we started to explore the topic of urban regeneration and its solutions, such as tactical urbanism, for example, that is now very popular. But you can imagine in that year, it was totally new. And following this, I spent many years in academia, researching the specific relationship between public space and community identity and belonging. So it's a third level of infrastructure, as my colleague mentioned already. I still teach in design school in Politecnico in Milano, but also in the Master of Eco-Social Design in Bolzano. So I start to be close to the mountain. Why? Because in 2016, I moved out of the big city looking for a different quality of life, different experiences, and began to apply the knowledge and practices I learned in another context. So I opened Studio Shift there. And that's why also I'm here today to explore the similarities and differences of placemaking in such a variety of contexts. And my contribution in chapter 9 of the booklet, Regenerative Neighbourhood, is about the story doing of a target project. In this project, we worked with young people and locals in the Alpine Arch to design and self-build new landmarks in 3 very remote valleys. And yeah, I will go on this story doing after in a minute. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Elena. Thanks for introducing yourself. So I think then now it's time to start like a discussion and a talk. We have some questions for you, and we're really looking forward to hear your insights. So let me start. The first question that I have is more to set up a bit of the context. Like placemaking is a broad term, and maybe we would like to know a little bit of what's your interpretation of placemaking and repurposing neighborhoods, and maybe also how this relates to the size of the community, or like if with the type of city maybe. So tell us a little bit about, yeah, how do you interpret the concept, and also how do you interpret it as well within the projects that you've been involved in? So maybe I would like to start with, let's say, Diego.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, indeed, like placemaking is an action, it's a process, it's a method. And what is important and interesting about it is that it's an inclusive method. So it includes people in many ways, on many scales, with the idea of collectively be able to reimagine, reinvent, appropriate, activate urban spaces to create community value. So that the important is really how these spaces or these places, they become an asset for communities, it's a resource for communities. But in the process, because it's an ongoing process, the idea that maximizes other things, that creates opportunities for capacity building, for social interaction is of course basic and super important, but also to create synergies between different actors. And I'm not talking only about communities, I'm also talking about private actors, institutional actors, public actors. The idea of placemaking is that it's a place and a process that puts people to work together, to share resources, to share knowledge, to share capacities and capabilities. Is a way actually to dig into the talents of people, to put into value, or to support the rest of the community. And it is a process that don't end. It has different stages, and many things can be also called placemaking. But the idea is that in the long run, these places, they also create memories and create identity for community, which is of course very basic in the construction of a strong community, of course.
Thank you.
I don't know if you share the same ideas from your side.
Yeah, I think well spoken answer. Yeah, if I had to add something to that, I think there is a very nice I don't remember who said that, but there is a distinction between space and place, and places are spaces with identity. And I think what placemaking does, and it's a very broad term, is that kind of prioritizes humans, I would say, also more than humans. I mean, also other creatures than us humans in the planet, because I think it's, as Diego said, placemaking is a process, and it's about participation, and it's about caring. For me, care is a very big notion in what we do. And yes, it's spaces are resources. So if I could put it in my example here, for example, is that so I live in a student housing, and the point that started the project that I did was that there is very little human interaction, even though it's a student housing. So this whole thing kind of at least started something, like neighbors could discuss what can we share between us. And that also gave me the confidence to push that a little bit further and create a chat for the residents. And now people can say, I forgot my key. I'm outside. Can someone open, because I cannot go in? So as Diego said, promote connections, and the space is there to be a resource for that. What do you think, Helena?
Yeah, I'm totally agree with this topic of identity, and me too. I can add a different point of view, adding that for me, placemaking, that means sense making. So this belonging ability, it's also the ability to imagine new solution, make them desirable. And we as Studio Shift, we aim to practice that collectively. And due to our context, and another point that's crucial for us is to view the population density as a key element. Because of course, if we are in a big city in a neighborhood, is one way to practice placemaking. In my context, in Italy, you have to consider that there are mainly small to medium-sized villages that on the total account for 70% of the total number of municipalities in the nation, in all Italy. So it means that there are more than 5,000 villages with fewer than 5,000 inhabitants. And that was our point in the recent years. And for us, to do placemaking means to consider a neighborhood in a sort of entire province scale. So I see the province as you see a neighborhood, more or less. And so in our case, placemaking means also design accessibility, create trust, open questions about how to reach and engage people that belongs to these different dots in very wide geographical areas. And yeah, this is interesting for me. And also I'm curious about your local projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for giving your insights on what placemaking means to you. When I read your contributions, I saw that some of the activities you mentioned were, well, like of course the digital platform, but also repair workshops or gardening. So I wonder about like making these activities happen. Who was involved? What stakeholders facilitated the establishment of these practices that you've seen come to light, so to speak? Maybe would you like to start, Anita? Telling us about that? Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, of course, there is the initiator of the project. So in this case, it was me, and the starting point was that this was my thesis project for the Malmö University Masters of Interaction Design. And then if we think in between cycles, so the active stakeholders was myself, and then the residents that took part in this. So they participated in the workshops, gave their feedback. We co-designed the whole thing together, gave me interviews, told me what interests them and whatnot. And then the coordinator of the residents here. So if we take it to another scale, like someone who is responsible for one of the houses here, who also then, because this, as I said before, this started something here in the residence. Also, she facilitated by providing, for example, as we say here in Sweden, fika, so coffee and some sweets for the workshops, and then later on, same for monthly fika of the residents. If we take it a bit outside this, the whole connection between the developers, as I said before, with the sustainability strategy and the densification plan, the city and a non-profit organization that works here for the community engagement, the university, who allows us to do the project in real life. Yeah, I think these were the stakeholders for me. What about the other projects involved? Elena, Diego?
I can go, it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
I returned to this target project just to go a little bit on this topic of stakeholders and to describe the two main actions that can help me to go in depth. The first action we did was an online school called the Animaker Academy. Our aim was to create a Trans Valley community of youngsters interested in local regeneration. In the school, we shared our professional knowledge, basically, about both community building, community making strategies and tools, and urban design to physically regenerate places at the end. And the second action, more focused, engaged local youngsters with their own local communities and sort of vertical self-building workshop. And this workshop aimed, as said, to physically create the stargates, one per valley, giving to the selected places this new shared community landmark. So we built in parallel 3 stargates in these 3 very remote villages. And this structures, differently from maybe the examples of my colleague, have no function. They literally serve as a pretext to change, even if temporarily, the identity of these spaces, public spaces, abandoned that they choose. And around these new landmarks, each local community promoted cultural events and performances during the summer of 2022. And we also linked all the 3 communities virtually, offering a sort of unique online program. And so this, for us, this was important to generate this sort of phygital community. And this activity also, last things important for me, is that we gave literally the protagonism to these communities, both youngsters and locals, highlighting, and that's highlight my stance as a professional, because I believe the success of placemaking intervention can be measured inversely to our direct visibility. So basically no one knows to your shift, but they really redo this appropriation in this valley. And I don't know, what about you, Diego?
Yeah, indeed, it's interesting to see how certain ideas or initiatives, they spark then a process that goes beyond. And then that's like a bit the beauty of placemaking, that it's not restricted to one part of the activity, but it can last actually, because it's about creating identity and memories. And then it reminded me one of the projects we did with Kakri. I think Anna, you put the link on the chat. Is Leestrat? So it's actually it started from an initiative, so an idea. I was working from another project together with Moonpunt, which is a library in the center of Brussels. And while working in the library with them, I realized that actually the space in front of the library is a nice place, is a nice square, but that street was actually not so much used, while you had a strong, very dynamic library just in front. So I reached out to the colleagues from the library and say, what if we think about activating this street for the summer? Would that be a nice idea? And they say, okay, maybe we can try it out, because actually, yeah, we realize that in summer we need to catch the attention of other people because it's different public that we have, but also we have activities that we can no longer host within the library, and why not to host in the outdoor space? So we made it once as an experiment, and then we made it 4 more times, even during COVID. So it was a 5 years project of activation of the street. And that was very interesting, because even though the initiative came from a simple idea, then our role as Kakri was also limited. So we were there doing the conceptualization and the design of the space, of the space. We designed it and we mounted it, we constructed the interventions, but actually the whole management of the project was done by Moonpunt as part of their running activities. So it was an institution running the public space intervention, and within the whole programming they involved a lot of other associations, from cultural youth associations and from educational facilities. So many people were involved, and many people that I don't know actually. So the whole process of 2 years activation, it creates a lot of interaction. And it also doesn't need to last forever. So it was a 5 years project and created an impact. It created a new way of working, maybe created a new programs and new systems within the organization of the work of the library of Moonput. But also for us, it was a learning process. And eventually something else would happen in the future, and that's okay. But what is interesting is that by identifying a place with kind of unrealized potential, but also identifying the key actors that could benefit from that in a constructive, of course, way, then the whole process then goes along. And that's part of the whole synergies that just finding opportunities could create.
Oh, thank you for all your insights. It's really nice to hear like that there was a bit of a personal driver for all of you, I think, and also that there was also some people that were involved, different organizations like the young groups. Maybe I wonder a little bit as well, or I would like to know, or you to tell us how these projects actually came to life, because of course these interesting activities need to have some financial resources to them. So I wonder, what organizations supported your work? Some of them you've mentioned them, but maybe more financially. How can these practices and how can these activities actually become more spread? Like who helped you?
Yeah, I think the question of who pays is truly crucial in these kinds of processes. What about our experience as Studio Shift? In our case, placemaking processes have always been desired by public entities or civic society organization, association, so really bottom up. And as you can imagine, that means that we have no resources for this kind of processes, or only occasionally, maybe public administration had some funds for the physical implementation of the urban solution, but it's not so common that they have a contribution for the process itself. But as we are here to demonstrate, is really, really crucial. And so our strategy, due to our market, let's say, our networks, is to engage promoters, so both in terms of sense and economics, which for us are mainly the social enterprises. So it's a third level, private, but also private for social missions. And also we ourselves, being a benefit corporation, we often play this role of those who, in addition to the process, also take care of fundraising. And so we literally sometimes we try to create the condition or to get directly funds to implement the processes. And in general, we use competitive grants mainly, at different scale level, local, from national, even at European level, try to create twinning in common areas. And also in a couple of cases, we experienced civic crowdfunding activity that also can work. And that's more or less what happens in Italy. I don't know in your countries.
Mm-hmm.
Anita, you can do?
I can take it from there. That's very interesting. Also about the social enterprises, that's I would like to know more maybe later. But so for me, in my case, it was my time that like the resources were provided actually by education, which is free here for European citizens in Sweden. And well done, Sweden. And then in the nonprofit organizations that I collaborate with, usually resources come from fundings, either municipal or European, but it's a very hard process also to apply to, and I'm learning too now, but it is a process to find the correct openings and then apply to, and can be really competitive. So that's a very interesting discussion to do, because I really think this, what we do and a lot of people around the planet does in these situations, promoting sustainability, environmental and social, it's a very important work. It will become more and more important because we live in weird times. So this is, it's really important, because I think for every one of us, as you said, Anna, it's personal. It starts from a spark that something needs to change. And I really love and I believe in participation, but also it needs resources, even if this is our time and expertise. And also to come back to the educational and researcher hat, I think also from this perspective, for me, it's very interesting having had this hat of the researcher, that I can also be not an objective one, but be there as myself and do active and action research and do placemaking, for example, as we can call it. Yeah. What about you, Diego?
Yeah, of course, it's a big challenge, but that's also what puts us in the context of placemaking as being an experimental method. It is that we also need to innovate in the type of business models and the financial flows around this kind of initiatives that they might start bottom up, but they are not necessarily bottom up. Actually, the idea is that they both this placemaking helps to reconciliate bottom up initiatives and needs and talents together with other frameworks at different levels. You need institutional support. You need also probably knowledge networks, so academia, researchers are also working on that, and you need also private developers, persons, businesses that can also get an added value from it. And it's the idea of having an ongoing process where you connect all these needs of different people around maybe a common narrative or around a common need, but with everybody can see what they can gain from that. And we need to be able to challenge actually the business as usual and try to provide new ways of business models. That's something that we are actively working on with a private client. They are asset managers and they work with office buildings. So they need, for example, to keep the office full of tenants, but there's a challenge because there's a lot of competition. So a trigger for them to engage with tenants is to show that that building has an added value for community. So that's already an economical need that is open to create other dynamics within the building that will create community value, but also can be capitalized in a way. So these are the kind of innovations that we will try to do and we will need to do, but we need to experiment first. And the good thing about placemaking is that you don't need so much resources in the beginning. You need some, but then it can grow incrementally according to all the different collaborations that you get in the process.
Nice. Maybe I would like, of course, everyone to, if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat and you can also ask each other. Maybe I have a question to you for the last thing that you said, Diego, that what is the added value that they are seeing these developers or that they are selling in that way?
Well, the model is simple for offices. In offices, they often belong to one landlord and they rent the office to different tenants. But of course, with the COVID crisis and the kind of crisis within the office sector, all these office buildings, they have been, there's a challenge actually to fill it in. On one hand, you have competition, a lot of new buildings sucking up tenants from old buildings. And on the other hand, you have the offices reducing in space. So you have a lot of vacancy. And so in order to be competitive, you need to offer something more than just a space to the people to come. And when this building actually starts to interact more with the community, that it creates other activities, there is a vibrant, dynamic place where you can meet other colleagues, or you could do business with other people, but you can also join your daily life within the building and the community, it is an added value, and that's a trigger also to simply be able to make new contracts with tenants. So it is not reinventing the wheel; it's just rewiring a little bit the system around.
Thanks for sharing that.
I have a question too, if I may. How do you think these projects could be sustained or continued in the future, or even replicated?
You mean all the different projects that we all mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all of you can reply as well.
Yeah. Should I? Okay, I'll take it. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of different resources, as we said, and that can be how for example, yes, how we continue the process I guess ourselves through, if it's a personal project, or through our organizations or companies. And I think, yeah, this has to do with personal motivation for one, I would say. And then, as we said before, the resources that might come through if you look into it. I think one very important thing is to see how, like, go with the flow. For example, with the digital platform, it was a prototype for in my case, for the neighborhood, and that was in the context of what the developers, for example, in the city wanted for the neighborhood. Because I don't remember if I mentioned that, but in every residence here, different residents have their own apps. Every resident has one app, which is for inner communication, but not in between. So there is a need for people to communicate with each other in between. And for now, this is done through a chat. Like, there's, for the beginning, if you want to establish communication, you can do it, as Diego said, with like easy ways that might be already there. It might not be that, for example, the platform that we co-designed had different modules, so that you could do your own module on an activity that you could share with others. And yes, technology can be something that is very good and promotes behaviors, but in the meantime, we can establish the communication with other ways. So yeah, so to sum up, I guess it's to continue to do the work, having the resources to back you up, even if this is time, or this is a means, like the technology, for example, to do something, but also to listen to do the thing while it goes, and not stick to, for example, it has to be that technology. No, it has to be that we allow people to communicate, for example. Helena?
Yeah, it's a sign for me, this idea of to enable participants. So in your example, the solution is the enabling point. And I have no successful solution at all, but I think it depends also on the scale and on the topic of the project. So other 2 tips I can add, ideas, is to enable also in terms of tool to replicate the process in a very autonomous way. So sometimes our point is to give a legacy to the participants, in that sense, to go on without us. I think that's an important point, even in case of no resources, because sometimes if you close the process delivering something, a place, again, a platform in the case of Anita, or other kinds of tools, probably is not necessary to have other money. They can run the solution by themselves. And of course, the 3rd level, in case of new needs in terms of economic to grow, I think that a good idea was to open up, to spread the voice, to educate some local organization to do to assess to the grants, to the funds. So I think could be important both in academic, for example, in Bolzano, into the master there is a course on that. I teach design for funding, so we really educate designer to have this expertise before to go outside the school. But also I think would be important, or I can speak about Italy, of course, to give this sort of human infrastructure also to public administration. For example, we have many resources thanks to Next Generation program, but in these small villages I have around, there are a few percentage of that really invest on people. So project manager, people that are able to write complex project at that level. But I think it's very crucial, because if we start such a kind of processes and we really engage organization, they need a leader, a public institution or something that can go on. So this could be important in terms of, yeah, skill, human skill.
Yeah, indeed. I was in the meantime taking some notes, but there are some theoretical things also about how to make it last for longer. On one hand, it is a collective process, so actually you need a common narrative to be able to put all these efforts together, because many people will have probably different capacities, different networks and different talents, and you need to be able to facilitate collectively, of course, the construction of a narrative for a place. But also, as we're talking about places and not spaces, as Anita was saying before, it is also important to recognize what's the vocation of a place. So as people has vocation, also the places they have vocations, they have a role to play within a neighborhood, within a city. And to be able to recognize that, even if it's a broad vocation, it is important, because there you are really talking about the more the genius loci of that place, what that place is important, and what's the possibilities of that place to bring to the community. Also, by having this both a vocation for a place and a common narrative, which is also maybe based on common needs, you can then put people to work together, and that's key. You need partnerships and you need synergies. You need people to support each other, but in a way that everybody contributes by also maximizing the capacities of the other. So you also were talking about that, Elena, that you need this kind of support, because some capacities and some talents you will find, for instance, in a neighborhood association, could be useful for an institution, and vice versa. The resources for an institution can maximize its capacities. And this is key, because at the end, we are also relying on motivation. That's an important thing. But of course, it needs to be financed, that motivation. So we don't want frustrations here. We want that the people with talents, they can maximize their talent and can put their values into common purpose. And also something that, especially for placemaking, it is important that whatever we produce is also synchronizing with the daily life of people. It shouldn't be a disruptive intervention. It has to be aligned with the daily life, so people can incorporate it easily within their domestic life, within their networks of friends, families. And it's not the difference between work and life. It is just part of the life of the neighborhood, and that's of course important when you have strong community in the making.
Thank you. I have one last question, and then we also have some question in the chat. What do you consider that it's the key factor for changing the way we use spaces in neighborhoods, and why? It could be something very specific, like a guess that you might have. I think you've elaborated already a little bit on it, but if you would have to pinpoint it. Anita?
Yeah, what I always think, and what I also love about the Bakakoken project, is agency. I think a lot has to do in participation, that we can feel that we can do something. I always imagine that, like taking off the ceiling in whatever we think as limits. Of course, there are limits and restraints, but to see a formal building, for example, as the initiators of this project did, and say, oh, we could try and buy it and turn it to a neighborhood. If you see the building is huge, it's enormous. The agency to see that we can put people together and the city and nudge people to think that this could be something that can be affordable and cultural and nice and social and unite people. I think it's at least one of the beginners to do that.
Sounds good. And what about Elena and Diego? Do you have a key thing that you would like to pinpoint? What is very, very important?
I love this image of gentle nudging. Me too. But I can add, probably for my background, that creativity could be also another important key factor, but not in the sense of course, free expression or imagination, but as a sort of intentional reshaping. So in my experience, this common envisioning, the design desirability of the solution is really, really relevant. But also, I'm close to the topic that Diego introduces about this vocation, co-creation of value that is, yeah, but it's a second, sorry. I give you, Diego, the stage.
No, yeah, I actually think that one of the key factors is that even though some of these initiatives, they are built collectively, that they don't always happen spontaneously. You need the trigger, and that's a role that most of the time is taken by experts and professionals. So you see it here with Anita and Elena. You need this expert role or this professional role sometimes to trigger things and to make it happen. And that role, maybe at the beginning, is a role where you put ideas, where you mobilize first people, when you plant the seeds, but it also slowly becomes a role of facilitating. And I think that's important, because sometimes even all the good wheels are there and the needs are there, the process doesn't go well because there's no facilitating role, and that's something that of course is key to make it happen.
Thanks so much. Really good points. I think this relates a little bit to the question that it's asked in the chat. So there's someone asking how critical to success is in a new placemaking activity or initiative. It's a stakeholder or institution. And then they are asking specifically about maybe in your role as facilitator or as initiators, I would say. What might be some of advice or tips that you could give to convince those stakeholders or those other institutions to get into these kind of projects in a meaningful way? What can be some advice or tips that you think could convince other organizations? Like what? Does it ring any bell?
Yeah, maybe I don't have the full answer, but
yeah.
I would say that maybe don't start with everybody in the same time. Maybe you start with some key actors that will follow your story easier, and then build trust and build partnerships, and this partnership will grow, and then of course you will maximize some potentials.
You also mentioned before, like, about building a narrative. What about you, Anita and Elena? What do you think could be a good way?
If I add to what Diego said, I think it's important to understand as we say, the map of actors, who is involved in this and who is affected by whatever placemaking project or initiative. And one very key thing is to understand their perspective of why this is valuable to them. And it can differ so much from stakeholder to stakeholder. If it's the city, it might be that they have in their plans to make the city more sustainable and show that to their citizens. If it's for the citizens, is to have somewhere to go Friday night and something affordable, or to share tools, as we said. And also to be able to build the partnerships, as Diego said, but also to be honest and listen and speak the different languages that you don't speak the same languages with participants, for example, children, for example, teenagers, and the case of Elena, or social workers or municipal people. So
thank you,
that would be
Anita.
my input.
Thank you. We are coming almost to an end. Maybe Elena, do you want to add something to this before we?
Really short. I also agree with this emic point of view. So be inside the network, the community. This is a good point. And this question reminds me a very famous sentence of Ezio Manzini, that is, social innovation works if you have a win-win-win system. So 3 win, not 2. So that what means for me in these kinds of processes, be clear of who gain what in a different level. Could be something practical or sense making again. So I think that could be very, very important. And also not only when you start the process, but also in the meanwhile, because also positions can change. So yeah, that's all.
Really, really good tips, all of you. Maybe we can continue with some tips and finish this webinar with a do and a don't. So some little piece of advice from your experience, or something that you would like to share with the audience before we let them go. So who would like to start?
Yeah,
Elena,
I can go.
maybe?
Yeah, I can go in with the
Sure.
flow of be inside, because my do is to make tool accessible. So to not to reduce, of course, our expertise, but make it really fluent, and so change the language in case, or make tool really, really accessible and useful for people. And don't never refuse an invitation for a lunch or for a dinner. So be part of that community. I suppose it's not only Italian, so accept every invite.
Right.
I like that, because that was my do. Go for informal settings. As a person, you don't have to like be someone else than you are, but food unites us, I would say. And so yes, go to informal. There is a lot, the whole thing that brings me to my don't, but a lot of these things are to understand and connect and relate, and relate with people in conditions that we don't. So this can be very well done in informal settings. And the don't then is not trying not to assume what people want, ask, understand. And it's a very messy, co-design is so messy. So there is no clarity, but we can work through that by understanding and finding patterns. And yes, Diego, to you.
Yeah, I've kind of repeating also things that were said before, but don't do it alone. You need always to do it with people. And do, on one hand, think about the role that everybody involved would play. That has to be very clear. And also another do is that always think about what's the productive economic plan behind it. It doesn't have to be always with the kind of common economic indicators, but it should have a kind of a productive logic behind. So it can be sustained, because motivation and voluntary work is super nice in a specific phase of the project, but it won't last forever. So the project cannot rely in the long term on only motivation and goodwill and and voluntary work.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for all of those do's and don'ts, and also for your participation today. We really, I really enjoyed, and I'm sure the audience did too. We will post this recording of the webinar on YouTube, so you will be able to access it and listen to the speakers again. So thank you, Anita, Elena, and Diego, really, for joining today. And I just wanted to announce or remind everyone that the DUT partnership is launching a new call soon in July, and you will be able to apply from September onwards. So keep an eye on our website and on our social media channels, so to hear more about us and about the next urban land talks that will resume or start again after summer.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a nice
Thank
day.
you.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao, have a nice day.
Bye, everyone.